You're listening to the podcast for all of the news, notes, and breakdowns for your Ohio State Buckeyes. This is Sons of the Shoe with Nick Wilson and Spencer German.
You know, we really need to change the intro because we officially have a new co-host for the show. It's Spencer German. It's Jake Vulinec joining me for the remainder of the season and hopefully for a long, long time to come. Sons of the Shoe, Spencer German, Jake Vulinec. You'll get used to the name. Jake, if you don't know, is a fellow part-timer at 92 The Fan like me. And, he's jumping in with this, and I'm looking forward to co-hosting with you moving forward, Jake. A lot to talk about today, and you're honestly coming on at the perfect time because as they kind of talked about at the end of the broadcast today, what awaits are like the two biggest games of the season, arguably, or three biggest games of the season if there's a rematch with Oregon. So you're jumping in at the perfect time.
Yeah, I like to make dramatic entrances. What can I say? I mean, I'll come in, I'll get a little warm up here at Northwestern, then we'll go Indiana, we'll go to Michigan, go Big Ten championship, hopefully, and just roll on with the playoffs. That's how we do it.
I called this game like the final tune-up before shit gets real, and on the midweek show this week, and that's kind of what this is for you. Like it's your first and final tune-up before shit gets real. We got real meaningful games to talk about coming up. So no, I'm happy to have you on, man. I'm looking forward to this. Hopefully our viewers and listeners are excited about it as well. It's going to be fun. And we certainly have a lot to talk about today. Weird game sort of out of the gate in this one. And we were kind of texting about it early on, but Northwestern was able in the first half, especially, to just control the clock. Like after the first quarter, the time of possession was like 10 minutes to 5 minutes. And Ohio State had only had the ball one time. And it really went against everything that I was hoping to see when I did the preview show, which was I really talked about I need to see this team get off to like a hot start offensively. And it was the complete opposite of that because Northwestern, I thought, did actually a really good job of like just playing this style where they were going to be methodical up and down the field and really make Ohio State's defense work and keep the ball out of their hands because they knew if Ohio State's offense got the ball, that it was game over for them.
Yeah, I think the first 4 drives all went 10 or more plays, I think was the graphic that they threw up. Like the defense, third down defense was something I specifically pointed out to you because it felt like you were getting them almost into third and long every time.
Yeah.
And then it was like a pass over the middle or a screen pass to the outside that just broke loose for 10, 11 yards. And they were just letting him march down the field. Like at the end of the day, sure, you keep them out of the end zone, but it's also like, not to say it, but it's Northwestern, right? Like you expect to keep Northwestern out of the end zone. You expect them to end with single digit points or like 10, 14. Like that's what you expect the end score to be. Very early on, the defense was not what you expected.
Yeah, and it's weird because that was another thing I talked about really after last week's game. And then this week was this idea that Ohio State's defense is the unit or the part of this team that I feel like is like the most prepared to win a national championship. Like the way they've been playing of late, even going back to the Nebraska game, which we all look back on and we're like, well, how the hell was that game so close? A lot of that had to do with the offense just couldn't really do anything. But the defense, I thought, played phenomenal that game. And like it started then, and it was almost like, and I've been kind of using this as the example, like the reasoning. The Oregon game felt like the defense got embarrassed, like flat out. Like the secondary played terrible. We know about Denzel Burke, who we'll talk about here a little bit more in a second from today. But like I think like took pride in this idea that, hey, we really, we dropped the ball in that game. We got to be better moving forward. And I thought we've seen that for like 4 consecutive weeks where they dominated. Not to say they were bad today. They give up 7 points. But you're right, like those third downs where they were giving up big chunk plays and not being able to get them off the field on those plays. And then you got saved a couple times because like there was the fumble that ended their first drive. You had the punt over the snap punt go over the punter's head. Then before that, you had like a fumble by the center trying to get the ball to louse the quarterback. And it was like, okay, so they bailed you out a little bit with some of those mistakes. But yeah, like today was one of the first times where I kind of had some questions about the defense.
Yeah, and again, it's not so much so like you want to rip on the defense because of what they did today. I mean, you pointed out 7 points given up, but it's when you look into the future, like Indiana's going to throw the ball a lot next week. There's no doubt that team's going to come out and try to attack your secondary, and looking at guys like Denzel Burke, like Davison Igbinosun, who had a pretty crucial penalty again late on a late down. Like, those are the guys that you look at that are then getting attacked, where it's, okay, this isn't going to be the difference maker when you're playing Northwestern. But if you go out and you look at that way against in Indiana, in Oregon, God forbid in the college football playoffs, that's where that starts to get exposed. And I think raising those concerns when Jack Lausch is throwing the ball is kind of where you want to start. It's like, okay, we see them now. Let's address those and try to cut them off here, because you're looking at real danger. Like, that's how Indiana beats you next week.
Yeah, and I think they will play a similar style, like where they try to control the clock. We know their offense is one of the best in football right now. I also think it was interesting, like Northwestern was coming off of a bye, and they looked pretty like locked in. Like I said during the week, like Ohio State, this is one of the last games Ohio State's going to have where they can almost just like out talent a team. And I think in general, like that margin or that idea, that concept is sort of shrinking in college football, because the NIL stuff is spreading the talent out more places and all these different things. So there's only so many teams on Ohio State's schedule every year where it's like, okay, they're clearly better than them. And I think this was the last time on this schedule this year that you're going to see that. And you saw that, I think, play out by the end of the game where they run away with it late. But like, it took a while to get there. And because of that, like, it felt like Northwestern coming off of a bye had a good game plan, had a good idea for like how to slow them down a little bit. And then eventually Ohio State's talent just won out, especially late in the half and then going into the second half. So that's an interesting thing, because next week is the same sort of scenario. You have Indiana coming off of a bye with an offense that's been one of the best in college football. And, what is their game plan going to be against you? How are they going to try to keep, get out of the gates hot? Because that's what everybody wants to do, is like they want to kind of put Ohio State in a tough spot. And Ohio State has proven they fell behind 10-0 to Penn State and still came back and won. They've proven they can overcome those things, but against better teams, that's harder to do. So that is one of the biggest things that I'm still sort of waiting to see now from Ohio State, is like, can they get off to a hot start with both the offense and the defense kind of being in sync and like either scoring quick and then forcing a 3 and out, or vice versa?
Yeah, it's kind of just like a get your morning coffee type of thing. Like, you just come out a little bit slow. It's almost like an underestimated, like, you want to ease your way into a game. And again, that works against Northwestern. You can ease your way into a game. You can walk out of the first quarter and be like, that sucked. Guess what? We're going to give it to you for 3 more quarters and we're going to be perfectly fine. That sort of out talent idea that you're putting forward. But when you can't do that against teams like Indiana. I mean, you did it against Penn State and you made it work. But in theory, you can't do that against Indiana, Oregon, anybody you play beyond that.
Yeah.
Even Michigan, that's a hard one. Like, that defense is so good. Do you really want to come out slow and put yourself behind the 8 ball to start a game against Michigan? No, probably not.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's my biggest fear with Michigan, is like, I understand we're all penciling that in as a win because it's Michigan and they're having a down year and they lost so many guys. But I don't know if that's like so clear cut, because that defense is still pretty good. I mean, they made an interesting game last week with Indiana, who's the team you're about to face. So yeah, I like if they make that game, if they muck that game up and make it close, you almost wonder if like they're. You always hear about like if a team thinks they have a chance once they keep a game sort of close for a while. That's like the most dangerous thing. It's like a snowball effect, and I worry about that with Michigan. But back to go ahead.
Yeah, but like, what's the fix for the slow start though? Because you mentioned it, like it feels like against like a Nebraska. I mean, for the majority of the game in that one, but also a slow start. Like, it's your offense. You can't move the ball. Today, it's the defense. The defense is just allowing long drives. It's not like one thing to pin down where, hey, like, clearly you just need to establish the run game early. Like, it's on both sides of the football, but not at once. The offense had one drive today. Sure, it didn't get where you wanted to, but it ended in a touchdown that just, it was one rotation of the ball in Jeremiah Smith's arms, or it was like, okay, now we have to punt.
And that was that's maybe the point for today, is like, I give them we saw signs that they can do it today, because if you score on that drive, you basically score touchdowns on each of your first, 6 drives of the game, 5 drives of the game. So like, if that had been a completion, you're 100% right. And so, yeah, I think today it was the context of they got off to a slow start because the defense couldn't get off the field, and because the offense only had 1 possession in the first quarter anyway. So that game ends the first quarter, and you're like, oh, like, what the hell's going on? But it's like, well, they only touched the ball 1 time for 5 minutes, and Northwestern had it for 10. So, and I texted you this, like, it just feels like we're still waiting for a game where the defense plays at an elite level, which they have for the last couple of weeks, and the offense like matches that, where like they're both just in sync from the jump, playing really good football, and like and I don't know, maybe they're saving it for next week and they'll surprise everybody and like beat Indiana by a couple scores, and people will be like, okay, like this is the Ohio State team we thought they could be. You know, you want to be peaking at this time of year anyway. But it's just crazy because it feels like if they can just get those games where everybody's kind of playing at the same level, you feel like this team legitimately has a chance to win a national championship.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, you're the number 2 team right now based on bits and pieces and not like individual performance. It feels like you feel like you've been one of the best defenses in college football at times. You feel like you've been a highly efficient offense at times. It's just never meshed together all at once. And again, if you're going to win games late in the season against good teams, I feel like that's the recipe to get it done. Like it has to actually come together. You can't have slow starts against good teams that are elite on one side of the ball, kind of in the diversity that you're going into within the next 2 weeks. A great offensive team versus a great defensive team. Like the wrong side of the football shows up in those games and the other one doesn't, you're in danger.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And I think like that's maybe the most disappointing thing from today, maybe. It's just that like I wanted to see this be the game where everything was like kind of in sync, playing really well. It was, again, your final tune-up, if you will, we'll call it, before you get to this bulk of the schedule where you have these 2 games to kind of end the regular season. And to not see them functioning fully yet is a little bit concerning. But again, I feel good enough that as they get ready for this game against Indiana, that they have the parts and pieces to do it. It's just about like, will it all bear itself out in the field? We were talking so much about the defense. I was going to bring this up because I saw they flashed this graphic up during the game. They basically, the graphic showed the fewest points per game allowed for power conference teams since 2010. And the 3 other teams on it were 2011 Alabama, 2021 Georgia, and last year's Michigan team. And Ohio State was next on this list, 2024 Ohio State, allowing 10.7 points per game. And all 3 of the previous teams they showed on the graphic went on to win national championships. So I thought it was interesting that they were kind of doing this like juxtaposition of how they compare to some of these other teams, how they fared against other Power 5 teams, which is, you know, the measuring stick for a lot of these teams in the college football playoff era. And yeah, I think it reaffirmed, even on a day where there were some disappointing things. I thought the third down defense, like we've talked about, was bad today. That this defense does have the talent and the ability to potentially go win a national championship.
Yeah, I really loved like poking holes and trying to rip on a team that gave up 7 points and came out with a like nearly 30-point victory.
It's the curse of being an Ohio State fan. Like that's just what we do. We nitpick every little thing. I nitpick a lot. I was so mad after that Oregon game, dude. And then like you went back and you watched it. It was like, I mean, they really didn't play a terrible game. There were some things that were bad and like the defense didn't play great. But it was like I found all these reasons to just like be mad because I was just mad that they lost. That's what we do. We want perfection.
Yeah. Like I'm mad at a defense that gave a touchdown today. A touchdown. that feels terrible. That feels like the complete. If you hold any team to 1 touchdown, I feel like it should be happy. But I'm not. Like the defense disappointed me today, especially early on in the game. I just feel like I should be happy, but I'm not going to be because I know at the end of the day that's not going to be the best offense that you face for the rest of the year. In fact, it might be the very worst offense that you face for the remainder of the year.
If you want to be unhappy that they didn't cover the spread, which is what I said that they would do in the preview show. So it was 28.5 and they only won by what? It was 31-7. I'm terrible at math. So 24. That's 26 points, something like that. 24 points.
24. Yeah.
Points. Yeah. Math was never my subject.
I mean, you were within a dart's throw from getting there.
26-24, 2-point difference.
Within a field goal, what's the difference?
It's like a gimme. We just round down. It's fine. I did want to ask kind of an overarching question from today and we'll certainly talk about, I think, some individual performances on the defense coming up. I know you had texted me about about Denzel Burke specifically, but I in terms of individual performances, I kind of threw this out there. I honestly felt like this was Will Howard's best game this season as an Ohio State Buckeye. And let me explain, because statistically, you go back and you look at his stats, And like, no, yes, he's had better games this season as Ohio State's quarterback. I'm not saying that like this is the best statistical game that he's had this year in terms of like the numbers that he put up. I mean, he threw for 292 in the win over Western Michigan. He threw for over 300 against Oregon in 2 touchdowns and completed he only had 7 incompletions in that game. So like, I understand in theory, like he's had better statistical performances, but I thought from a standpoint of like the throws he was making today, he had the best game that he's played since joining the Buckeyes. He had that really good throw to G. Scott on the drive right before the half that set up then the throw he made to Carnell Tate for Carnell Tate's first touchdown of the day right before the half, the diving one that we couldn't see because of the weird camera angle, which we will talk about later. Like I just felt like every week it's kind of, again, it's the curse of being an Ohio State fan. We nitpick so much. And I think CJ Stroud probably spoiled us a little bit. Like he was making these pinpoint throws game after game. And so we thought like, okay, this is the standard at Ohio State now. And so if your quarterback isn't doing that, you like get a little upset about it. There's been some inconsistencies where like he's not seeing things, or he makes a weird throw, or he's just short on a deep ball or whatever. And today it felt like every throw was like tight window. There was a couple like over the middle throws on like on dig routes where he was like zipped it right out of the arm of a defensive back to a receiver, and then the receiver like would make a couple moves and gain some big yards. On top of the 2 that we just mentioned, to G. Scott and Carnell Tate. Like I thought today, from like an accuracy standpoint and like making the big throws in the precision throws, that he was superb. And so that's why I throw that question out there. I don't know how you felt about it. I don't know how much of the other games like you've watched in terms of intently with Will Howard to this point in the season, Jake. But like I just felt like this was the best performance we've seen from him from like a consistency standpoint and like making the throws that we hope that he can make on the biggest stage.
Yeah, I thought he looked really good throwing the ball. I mean, I've paid decent enough attention to Will Howard to like understand. I've watched a majority of Ohio State's games this year. I don't know if you can say it's his best performance. Like he looked really good. I think by far, when you pick out like some of his best throws as a Buckeye, you end up with today.
If you pulled like the top 5 throws of his season, there's probably like 3 from this game that are in there, maybe.
Yeah, right. Like if you're talking about potential on what he can be, yeah, 100% today, which by the way makes sense when you're talking about like transfer quarterbacks and coming in and you have 1 year to learn the system, not even. Yes, as the season goes on, I think that you should continue to look better. Like you are sort of still learning the system as you go throughout the season and getting more comfortable with your receivers. You haven't built that connection up over 2-3 years, even with the coach, the staff, what it's going to look like, anything like that. There were just still a couple of throws today, even that got through. I think it was a 3rd down. It was a completion over the middle, Jeremiah Smith, I think in the 3rd quarter.
Yeah.
Like he squeezed it within a ridiculous window. But I looked at it and I'm looking at the defensive back and I'm like, did he have a chance to jump that ball? Like, was he a step slow to jumping that? And it just got through because that happens? Or was that actually like a picture perfect throw where, hey, that guy was moving and that's what it's going to look like against everybody? But I was sitting there, I was like, I almost feel like the defensive back was delayed a step compared to what you might see from the top echelon of talent. So it was like, does that end in a deflection or an interception, or is that one that gets through every time? I could be totally wrong. Like I didn't go back and watch the play. I looked at it initially and then once on the replay and I was thinking like, not so sure. Like I'll take the completion, but is that really there? I don't know. I mean, it was definitely a good game for Will Howard overall, though. I'm not going to say like, I don't know if I place it as his top game as a Buckeye, but it's definitely within the top 3. And like we said, if you take probably 3 of his top 5 throws, they come from this game.
Yeah, I would say that I think what you said was a good point because I was gonna say that too. Like, there's maybe some of those tight window throws, that window's even tighter when you're playing a team like Georgia. You're playing a team like, I don't know, Bama or Texas or whatever. Some of these upper echelon teams where the talent's higher. Yeah, like maybe that corner's a little bit quicker and can get to that ball. So it's a good point. I just thought like I walked away feeling pretty impressed by his performance overall. And maybe to your point, it's maybe it's for some people, maybe it's not his best. Again, I've said this before, like the Oregon game, even in a loss, I thought that was the game where you found out like, okay, Will Howard can be the quarterback that takes you where you're hoping the season goes. Is he CJ Stroud? No. But he proved like big stage, high pressure, high stakes moments. He's not gonna falter, other than I guess at the end of the game with the weird 12 men on the field penalty that Dan Lanning took advantage of, which was savvy by him. But like I think Will in that moment thought the clock reset, and that's why he thought he had more time when he slid down. I don't think he realized there was only 6 seconds left. So yeah, like other than that one blunder, I thought he actually played like a very composed game. He threw for the over 300 yards. Like he was doing all the things you want him to do, even if the throws weren't perfect every single time. And so that was the game where I felt like, okay, this guy can be the quarterback for this season. He sort of showed me in that moment, like he's better than Kyle McCord. I have more faith in him than Kyle McCord, and he can be that guy. I don't think he's the best quarterback in the country by any means, but like, yeah, I learned that about him. I just felt today you saw like the full package of Will as a runner, and he didn't, I don't even think he had, I'm trying to remember. I don't think he had like a ton of rushing yards, but it was just the fact that like they were utilizing that as part of his skill set, which continues to be something that I think they'll exploit more and more down the stretch of the season here. Like him as kind of this dual threat guy. Yeah, he only had 1 rush attempt today, but it's the idea that like they're using him in like these option plays. And Chip Kelly, I thought, had a really good game plan again. And I honestly think we're going to see more of that in these next 2 games, because I think they know that that's a weapon that they haven't leaned on a ton yet, and they're kind of saving it in their back pocket as like something that they haven't shown a ton on tape yet for like the Michigans and the Indianas and the Oregons the second time around. So, but yeah, like I thought the threat of him as a runner was there today, and they utilized that. I thought he made all the right throws, made some precision throws, made some amazing throws. And I don't know, the sum of its parts, like it checked a lot of the boxes that I've been looking for Will Howard this season, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think when you talk about him as a runner and what kind of stood out today, like you mentioned, like the threat of a run, but he also moved around like outside of the pocket a lot.
Yeah.
Like they placed him outside of the pocket a lot to make some of those throws where he just rolled out right or rolled out left. And it looked like the design of the play, like it was almost a bootleg, but not exactly, but like ended up all the way on, like the hash mark and beyond, where he set up to make his throws while the pocket was still set up on the complete other side of the field. I think he looked good moving, and I agree with you. I think that's something that they kind of looked at today and were like, let's not quite go to that. Let's not go there quite yet. Like, if we want to show off a little more of Will Howard, the runner, like, let's just save that for maybe when we need it and make things. If a team can look at him and go, yeah, Will Howard can run the ball, but I mean, he hasn't had a game over this year where he's gone over 6 yards to carry, 1 carry for 6 yards.
His most was, the most he ran was the Penn State game a couple weeks ago, where he ran 12 touches, 24 yards. And so that's part of the reason why I think like they're going to tap into that more, because that was like your classic, like Big Ten physical game where, and against a ranked opponent, and he ran 9 times against Oregon. So it was like, they were utilizing that a little bit more in those 2 games. I think we're going to see even more of that as the playoff, going into the playoff and all those different things. But yeah, just the threat of that. And that was something that Kyle McCord did not bring to the table whatsoever. Like, he was not a running quarterback. And when you have 2 of those running backs, the 2 running backs that you have back there, it just adds like another thing for the defense to think about. So we'll see if they open that up a little bit more. The biggest thing, though, along those lines, Jake, is I still have concerns about this offensive line. I don't have concerns about Seth McLaughlin, by the way. He's been fantastic this year. I thought Donovan Jackson was all right today. There was some play, like that one throw that Will made. I actually think it was one of the like real tight window precision throws. I think he made it to Emeka Ibuka, where Jackson was like blocking his guy, and he almost, like, he was like a millisecond away from just like stripping the ball out of Will Howard's hand. Like I jumped. I was like, I cringed for a second because I thought he was going to get hit. I think he's still kind of coming to his own in that role. I think the offensive line is still figuring some things out. I get they're banged up. They're sort of makeshift right now. I felt better leaving other games recently about the offensive line than I did today. And that's been the theme of the season, really, has been, what can that offensive line group do for you? Can they hold up enough against some of the better teams in college football to win you a national championship? And as we get to now this home stretch where you got 2 really good teams coming up, that always, Indiana that's ranked, and Michigan, who always seems to be in your head, like I still have some questions and doubts about how good that group's going to be in those games and on the biggest stages that await them beyond that.
Yeah, the Donovan Jackson play, like, am I crazy or did Will Howard have time on that play? Like,
he did have a lot of time. You're right about that.
I felt like that's
That's
it's
unfair
not
of
an
me to put that one on
overreaction.
him. That's unfair of me to put
No,
that
because
on.
the broadcast did it as well. I mean, the broadcast pointed out, like, ooh, like right there, almost got to him. But I felt like, I mean, Jackson did a relatively good job at forcing his guy to go wide outside. He beat him all the way around the back of the pocket and then almost got to Will Howard. Like, I feel like Will Howard had ample time to make that throw. Like, it was a tight window throw. I thought he had time there. I would say the more concerning thing from the offensive line today was what they were able to do in the run game. I mean, there were not a lot of holes.
It felt like every couple plays, somebody was just like leaking through. Like, I remember 2 times, one time Travion Henderson, one time Quinshon Judkins, at least, had to like spin off of a guy in the backfield and then make something out of nothing. And that's why you get those guys, because they can make those plays for you. But like that's not obviously ideal when you got guys just like coming in free to tackle your running back in the backfield. And to the point earlier, we mentioned that like more talented teams with more talented players are going to make that play.
Yeah, like both running backs end with over 70 yards, like basically sitting right at 75. I feel like that was a lot of individual, though. Like you said, like they made a lot of guys miss today. There were a lot of moves, like Travion Henderson hurdling his defender, turning what would have been like a 4-yard gain into like a 7-yard gain. Like there was a lot of just leaning on Judkins and Henderson, and like you said, that's what those guys do. They turn smaller gains into bigger gains. Like you have that dual-headed backfield because both of those guys do that. It was just when you let top D lines in the country through, they're bouncing off those guys a whole lot less.
Yeah. I mean, that's what happens with Michigan the last couple of years, right? Like the team that dominates the trenches in that matchup has generally won, and the team that runs the ball the best has won the last like 10 times or something crazy like that. So you need to be able to run the football. You need to be able to be more stout up there. And like I said, that's been sort of the common theme of this entire season. It's been like each week you're hoping to see a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more from the offensive line, and then you sort of walk away with just more questions than you had before the game started. But yeah, you're right. Like, and they still rushed for, 173 yards today. They and this is a bad Northwestern run defense anyway. They came in like one of the worst run defenses in college football at this point this season. And yeah, like I thought late in the game there was some progress made. Like there was a couple of those big Travion Henderson runs where like there was just like a massive hole on the right side where he just burst through for like 15 yards. So it got better as time went on, but I also think that was a little bit of like wearing down a team like Northwestern. Yeah, like it's crazy because I don't mean to sound like a broken record with this because we talk about it every single week, but I now go into this home stretch and that is still the area that I'm the most like uneasy about because I just think it seems like they take a step forward every now and then like they take a step back, and I just don't know week to week what you're going to get from those guys. And when you get ready for 2 big matchups coming up and then maybe a rematch with Oregon on the other side of it, it makes you a little bit nervous for sure.
So, I mean, I guess then it comes down to, like, what do you need to see out of the offensive line that's actually going to make you feel confident going into a game like that, right? Like, what do you see today against Northwestern?
Domination, like just 300 yards rushing.
Like, is that what has to happen? Like, I don't know. I don't think they looked awful today. I don't think they dominated. Like, they looked fine. But I also think that's kind of where you're at with them. They're going to be fine. Like, if they win a majority of those games, you have to get creative when your offensive line's banged up like that. Like, you knew this was a problem from the start of the season. Like, the offensive line was the number one question coming into the year.
Yeah.
Like, were they going to produce? You have to find ways to just sort of circumvent your O-line. Like, you have to be creative in the pass game. You have to change up where you're releasing the ball from if you're Will Howard and you're Chip Kelly designing that. I don't think you can always just put that on the offense line. Like, yeah, there's going to be times they slip through, but you got to show me something creative. You got to show me a way to get away from fully trusting your offensive line just to hold up against the best guys in football, because it's not what they're designed for. You have a left guard playing left tackle right now. That's where you're at. Like, it's ugly. Go find a way to make it happen another way. Like, what they used today, I think rolling out Will Howard a lot, that's probably something that you're going to see even more, because just take away the D line. Go make a linebacker, go beat him off the edge. See if you can get something short, intermediate, not always trying to hit the home run ball.
I think that's a good point, because the last couple of weeks, I think Chip Kelly's just been like brilliant with his play calling. The Penn State game, they ran sort of like a variation of a Will Howard, almost like option pitch play with, I think they did it with Trevion and Judkins, where it was like he'd take a step forward and make the defensive end kind of decide, and then just like sort of do this like forward pass toss thing from in the backfield. And that's the type of stuff, like you said, that almost allows you to, if you have a weakness on the offensive line or it's not your strength, you can take advantage of those things because it gets your running back a little further outside where then they can sort of make a man miss in space and do something with it.
And then everybody else has basically got double teams, right? Like, because you're basically leaving the one D end alone. Like, hey, make a decision. Like, either go make a play or I'm going to beat you on the option.
Yeah. And I think you're 100% right. Like, those are the types of things that Chip Kelly needs to continue to do. And to me, like, Chip Kelly's been one of the strengths of this entire team this year, like understanding like where they're at with the offensive line issues at times. And like, okay, how do we work around that? Do we need to chip certain players and then get them out on like a route if we're doing like a pass play? So there's been a lot of brilliance, I think, from Chip in that way. And yeah, like in these matchups coming up, I think you're going to see even more of that. But I think the general consensus here is like, today wasn't the worst offensive line day, especially from like a pass protection standpoint. I was a little hard on Donovan Jackson for that one play. But yeah, like the run game stuff is where it's concerning because, and I just have nightmares running through my head because that's been the area that you've lost to Michigan the last couple of years. It's been like, you're not physical up front enough to run the football on them. And then they've beaten you 3 times in a row. So that's where I think a lot of that comes from for me and from other Ohio State fans as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I just like Chip Kelly's been really good. I have no like gripes with Chip Kelly, so I don't doubt he's going to do it. But if you don't, like, that's where it's going to come to bite you. Like if you just sit back and let your offensive line get beat, because they will get beat, like against Oregon's defensive line, against Michigan's defensive line. There's going to be times where that offensive line just looks inferior.
I mean, Oregon looked bad against Oregon, and that was still when Josh Simmons was healthy. Like that was bad. Like
the offensive line is inferior, so if you just let them look inferior, it's hard just to pin it on, hey, the offensive line just didn't show up today. Like, no, they're worse. Go show me a way to get away from them being worse. You have to show me something else, which I think Chip Kelly will do, but like I actually need to see it.
Yeah. I think we'll see more of that. And I'm fascinated to see what he schemes up in these next 2 weeks because they're obviously massive games, and these are your 2 biggest tests. Oregon was the biggest test, but your 2 biggest tests since then. And yeah, it's going to be a massive statement for the Buckeyes if they can find a way to be physical, especially, again, knowing the history with Michigan the last couple of years. If they can come out of that game and they look like a really physical offensive line, I think that sets the stage for like this, like how far this team really can go in the college football playoff. All right, that brings us to the end of not the end, but the final segment, if you will, of our post-game show. We always like to reserve this final few minutes for our segment we like to call Like It, Love It, and Leave It. Something we liked from today's game, we loved from today's game, and that we would leave from today's game. Jake, as the new member of the pod, I will let you start first with what you liked from today's win for Ohio State.
I liked Carnell Tate's show-out game in Chicago. That's what I liked. Like that first touchdown catch specifically, I mean, contortion in the air, really good ball by Will Howard, but was able to turn his body in the air to make sure he landed on his back and actually secured the football. I thought he looked really good. And when you're talking about wide receiver 3 on a football team showing out and looking good, you tend to feel better about the wide receiver group as a whole, right? Like we know they're one of the best in college football, if not the best in college football. Those are games why. Because when your wide receiver 3 is going out and scoring 2 touchdowns and running good routes, getting open, showing you athletic things, that's what I like.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. I'll alter it a little bit because mostly though, like it was good to see Carnell Tate really have like a breakout game. He's had some solid performances lately, but for him to sort of, as the season's gone on, become more and more of a go-to target for Will Howard's been great. And we know everyone's been so rightfully so obsessed with Jeremiah Smith, who's been incredible, that I think they forgot how good of a recruit Carnell Tate was coming out of high school as well too. So like he's fantastic in his own right. He's gotten sort of overshadowed here, but he was awesome. And along those lines, I'll sort of alter my like it a little bit to just the discrepancy, the Will Howard's ability to like use multiple receivers, like seeing how as the season's gone on, he's progressed to, it doesn't just have to be a Mecca. And Jeremiah, I think, has kind of cemented himself as like his number one target at this point. I mean, he had that big play in the was it the end of the first half, I think, where he just like broke across the middle and then down the sideline. It might have been the second half, actually. But yeah, like he's clearly the guy that he's looking at first on like a play, like a needed play. Like we need a first down on third down, whatever. And I think that's awesome. But like now Tate's involved. He knows Emeka is as steady as they come. Emeka might be like a first round pick in this year's draft. Like It's crazy to think that he's like second, sometimes the third option on plays because of how good the other guys have been. But like, yeah. And even like he's getting G Scott involved a lot more as the season's gone on. So that's been good to see. But yeah, like I just think in general, like his ability to get all these receivers involved, and we've seen the evolution of Carnell Tate and others has been good. I'll start us off with our love it, and I'm going to go with what I was talking about earlier. I thought this was Will Howard's best game in terms of just the accuracy, making the big boy throws, and I loved that we finally got a performance where I'm walking away like, okay, I don't walk away feeling like not uneasy. That's not the right word, but that there was like stuff left out there or like throws that he missed. I felt really good about his performance overall today.
Yeah, Will looked good. I mean, we talked about him for a pretty decent amount. I love it, I guess. I'll go to the fact that he capitalized off of mistakes again. Like, this isn't a game where you have to capitalize off of mistakes. Again, you're probably going to out-talent them, but every single time that you see Northwestern sort of mess up, like sort of the center's butt fumble on third down turns into fourth, which then turns into a punt, which also gets fumbled, which then you block and get on the 1 yard line and turn into a touchdown. Like, don't let the easy capitalizable mistakes go uncapitalized on, right? Like the game was still not feeling great for you at that point. So you were able to get the block punt and you sort of just use that to torpedo yourself into, okay, let's get back into being us. Like, here we go. Now this is where we're going to settle down and sort of take the lead and impose our will.
I like that. I'll let you go first. Actually, I'm going to go first real quick with my leave it because I kind of have two leave-its, but my first leave-it is football games at Wrigley Field. Who cares? I understand there's like a nostalgic beauty about Wrigley Field and that venue. And listen, I said this on the show earlier this week. On my sports bucket list is to see a baseball game at every MLB stadium across the league, and Wrigley is still on that list. I have not made it to Wrigley yet, so I want to see a game there. There's like a very romantic feeling about Wrigley Field. I agree. But we don't need to play football games there, all right? It is not a football stadium. Maybe it looks cool. And I get why they're doing it. I did it this year because they're building that new stadium, and temporarily they have like that very downsized stadium that, like, for an Ohio State game, you're going to get a lot of people in town. So I get they were trying to find a bigger venue for it in general. Fine. Hopefully this was a one-off. But I don't need games at Wrigley Field. The TV camera angles were terrible. We couldn't even see the Carnell Tate touchdown like live. They had to show us all the replay angles because there was a crowd in the way. So yeah, it was. I just thought it was. We don't need to do that anymore. Forget it. I know that. Don't they have a bowl game there every year? I don't even.
I think so. Yeah.
Who cares?
Well, we're on the same page with
football games and baseball stadiums.
Yeah, we're on the same page there. I was looking for my keys. I don't know where they are, but I have like a little thing that shows me every park that I've been to. So like we're on the same page.
How many have you been to?
7 or 8.
Oh, okay.
I think we're still early on in the process.
I was gonna say I'm around like 9 or so. So I'm like right around the same as you, 8 or 9, something like that. I can't remember.
Yeah. Both haven't been to Wrigley. Maybe we'll have to catch a football and a baseball game.
Maybe we should take the pod on the road at some point and go see a game at Wrigley and then watch it during football season next year and watch Ohio State. We could have gone to this game and covered it and then said, hey, we saw a game at Wrigley. Technically, it wasn't baseball.
But hey, it doesn't really matter. It's not even the baseball. I don't care about seeing the game at that point. I just want to see the venue. I just want to walk around, maybe use the restroom in the trough style terrible bathrooms that they talk about. See the food.
Bathroom.
Yeah, that's what I really care about. But no, it was terrible. Like I was literally like, oh, is Carnell Tate gonna get the touchdown? Looks good. And then all of a sudden I have like 4 hands and like 3 people's heads as the main shot in the camera. And I was like, no. And then I think there was another play where it was like, oh, sorry, we'd have a better angle for you, but there's no room down the sideline because it's the right field line and the wall's there. Like, okay, so maybe we just shouldn't be playing football games in a baseball stadium.
Yeah.
I also saw on social media, like I had a friend there and he's showing it, but they're like behind home plate. So they have like a big overhang over top of them and you can't even see like the top of the goalpost on one side. Like, okay, it's just not good views. There's just terrible angles, and they're in the back of one of the end zones, and it was still not the best view of a football game. I don't know. We can leave those out.
It's a charming venue, but not for football. It was nice as a one-off. Maybe, well, next year they won't play at Northwestern if they play again. I can't remember if they're on the schedule next year or not. It'll be at Ohio State, though, if they do. So we only hopefully have to worry about this one time, and that's it. But
yeah, watch out. Wildcats in the shoe. That'll be one that they're packing the stadium for, and everyone's riled up to see.
At least the camera angles will be normal, but yeah.
Yeah, they'll look good. They'll at least be able to see it on TV.
Anything else you're leaving today?
Yeah, my leave it's going to be Denzel Burke today.
Yeah, I figured you were going there. That's why I said we were going to come back to it.
Yeah, I mean, the dude, listen, what was the wide receiver's name here? What was the Northwestern wide receiver who was cooking him?
Henning.
Was it A.J. Henning or was it Bryce Kurtz?
Oh yeah, actually you're right. It was Kurtz who caught a couple passes against him. Yes, but Henning had a good game too. Yes.
Yeah, like Bryce Kurtz was making Denzel Burke look like a Matt corner. Like this guy could have been playing for Kent State and the only team I think left in the FBS who hasn't won a football game. Like he was getting toasted on every route. This is a guy who they're talking about being a number 1 pick, and he's getting lit up by Bryce Kurtz. Like, no shot at Bryce Kurtz, but you're going to have bigger matchups on you. You have to better. Like, that plus third down defense. Like, I'm genuinely scared for the secondary and when they go up against Indiana. Like, Davison Igbinosun and Denzel Burke did not look that great today. And that team is just they're going to identify whoever's worse, like Denzel Burke against Oregon. Like, they just said, hey, here's Denzel. We're going to make sure that you go try to earn that first round pick that you're going to try to be. Because we're just going to throw the ball at you 50 times.
You know who I have no doubts about in the secondary is Caleb Downs. That dude is incredible. He like flies up and makes these plays in the backfield sometimes, and you're like, "What?" That that dude's amazing.
He had a huge tackle on the tight end today.
Yeah, I know exactly the play you're talking about. Yeah, but yeah, like and I do think Igbinosun's been a little more consistent. He's made some big plays. Denzel though, man, like. It feels like ever since that Oregon game, he has just been like exposed by every team. Like every team is attacking him. And it's one thing for Tez Johnson from Oregon to like go off against you because he's really, really good. But for, like you said, for
Bryce Kurtz, maybe.
Bryce Kurtz to go off against you was a little bit concerning in a game that you clearly are the much better and more talented team. So yeah, I'm curious about his draft stock after this season. I will add as my actual leave it because the Wrigley Field thing was kind of a joking one. I just the third down, really the third down offense and defense because the offense today only converted 4 of their 10 third downs, and I think overall Ohio State this year, I would say they're like in the late 30s in terms of like third down conversions versus like some of these better teams in college football, Miami, Oregon, etc. Those teams are like in the top like 5, like. So that's something we know how important. It's so cliche, but we know how important third downs are in those bigger matchups. Like you got to be able to stay on the field and convert those. And conversely, the defense not being able to get off the field, just third downs in general. Like today, I thought were a problem. And to your point, like you got to be better in those scenarios when you play Indiana next week, when you play Michigan after that, even though Michigan's a flawed team, and when you maybe get a rematch with Oregon, we know that stuff's going to be important too. So yeah, like that's something hopefully they can correct, and we'll see what that looks like. So, Jake, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me, but I would love to see what the average third down was for the Northwestern offense because they completed, 6 of 16 plus 2 of 4 on fourth down. Like, especially early on, I felt like every third down was third and long, and they were still getting it. Like, I would love to know what their average third to go was in that game and what they were completing at. Again, I don't have
actually a really good question, and I too would be curious to find out what that was because I think it's a fascinating one. We'll have to look into that for next week. Because I just there were so many times in the first half it was like 3rd and 10, 3rd and 13, and somehow, some way they were always converting it, which was alarming.
Yeah, I think the fourth was like a 4th and 12, and they completed it too late in the game. Like, okay. Like, just step on. Like, we got to stop from getting 12 yards. All right. Like, again, I Bryce Kurtz and Jack Lausch are not the guys that I'm looking at and being like, oh, I knew they were going to cook today. Like, no.
I will say Northwestern does deserve some credit because I thought Jack Lausch played a really good game, and I thought they utilized him very well. I brought up the fact that like Ohio State in the last couple of years has struggled with mobile quarterbacks, and I thought they utilized him as a runner pretty well today. And that's something that other teams that maybe have quarterbacks that could do that is now, Oregon being one of those teams can certainly take advantage of. But yeah, I thought he actually played like maybe one of the best games he's played all season. And
as a passer, I think.
Yeah.
Against Ohio State defense, no doubt.
Yeah. So credit to him. Real quick, I'll throw this in here. Our good friend from 92 to the Fan, JB Smooth, says, why can't they use the stadium, Spencer? I just don't think baseball stadiums are meant for football games. That's all I'm saying. It's the same thing. Listen, I'm a Red Sox fan. When they play that game at Fenway Park, I think it's stupid. Like it just doesn't fit in there. It's not meant for football. Okay. And it's dangerous. You know how close to the wall on like the one end zone was? If you threw a touchdown to the back of the end zone, somebody could have legitimately gotten hurt, like Marvin Harrison Jr. against Georgia a couple years ago style, and like been knocked out for the rest of the season. So I just don't think we need to fit them into stadiums. I get why they did it this year. They don't have a real stadium right now, but moving forward, never again. I'm good.
My favorite part about that end zone, I think, was that it was a half wall too. It wasn't even a full size wall. It was a half wall in the back. Like, oh yeah, let's go and hit your knee right on the corner of the wall. That'll
topple over like Torrey Hunter going for that grand slam from David Ortiz. Another Red Sox reference for you. All right, guys, we had plenty of baseball references in this show. A lot of good content as we reflected on the Buckeyes win over Northwestern. We will be back next week with our preview episode of the big matchup with Indiana, which actually I believe we are planning on having Zachary Osterman, who covers Indiana. He's on the beat out there in Bloomington, and we'll see if we're trying to get him on so he can kind of help us preview this matchup, let us know what we don't know about Indiana and what he kind of is anticipating for this matchup. So that should be a lot of fun. And we'll, of course, go through our normal preview and all that good stuff. So appreciate you guys jumping on in with us. We'll be back with our midweek episode. And then, of course, as I said earlier this week, shit gets really real next week with Indiana and Michigan on the other side. Thanks for stopping by, guys, for the latest episode of Sons of the Shoe. As always, go Bucks.